so, because the question arose about what's this talk of bliss and emptiness and what is the bliss about. So there's many different kinds of bliss. Some of it is ordinary bliss, some of it is Dharma bliss. Okay, so ordinary bliss I think we're quite familiar with. You know, there's different ways people feel quite joyful and quite happy. And with Dharma bliss you have the, sometimes just doing the visualization itself of the deity is quite blissful because the deity is so beautiful, you know, and just the qualities and the connection you really feel. So just the visualization can be quite blissful. Sometimes they talk a lot about the bliss of samadhi. When concentration gets very deep, then it's very, very blissful. And then they talk also about the bliss that is comes in Tantra, which is different from the bliss in samadhi, which is different than ordinary bliss. I mean, they all have some qualities, in common, but they also have some differences. So it may happen, when you're doing retreat, at certain, sessions, you feel quite blissful. That's great, go for it. That's fine. But what you want to avoid is any kind of mind that gets attached to it and tries to recreate it. Because as soon as you do that, then you usually get frustrated because it won't come back the way you want it to. Okay? So it's a thing of just, if you're having some blissful experience, or even it's not what you would call bliss, but some kind of real satisfaction. I know when I am able to let go of something I've been carrying around for a long time, there's a real sense of satisfaction and peace and bliss in the mind. So when you have that kind of thing, that's great. And, stay with it. That's, yeah, good. Now, somebody asked, because they were saying that an FPMT teacher had come to their Dharma center and had taught the 9-round breathing like I taught you last year, and then also taught the seed syllable meditation. And so this person was asking, why did I teach the 9-round breathing and not the seed syllable meditation? And that's because the seed syllable meditation was that Lama taught us was actually the Tummo meditation from the completion stage. And Lama, I think, was kind of experimenting with us and, kind of seeing, well, what's going to happen with these injis? Because none of my other teachers have taught that. Yeah. But Lama did. And I remember an instance where one of Lama's students was relating at a conference to His Holiness that he had been teaching the seed syllable meditation to other people who weren't necessarily Buddhists, but, it provided them some sense of bliss and peace. And His Holiness was not really in favor of that. He said people need, proper guidance for that kind of thing. And His Holiness has also said at other times that these practices of working with the winds and channels and drops, they're not particularly a Buddhist practice, that the Hindus do them also. Yeah? So you have to really look, and that's the same for, developing concentration. It's a practice that's well known in other religions as well. So then you have to really think, well, what is it that makes it a Buddhist practice? And it's our refuge, it's our renunciation, our bodhicitta motivation, and especially the understanding of emptiness that's going to make those kinds of things into a Buddhist practice. And then a few weeks ago when somebody brought up bliss, I was saying that, sometimes they give it the analogy as it being like sexual bliss, and how I found that puzzling because while sexual bliss feels nice, it is not very satisfying in the end, because you just have to do it again. don't you? Feels good, and then you have to do it again. And so when you look at the when they're talking about the meditations on the channels, winds, and drops in Tantra, I think it's got to be quite different than that kind of sexual bliss, because they're trying to, by moving the drops in certain ways and getting the winds to enter and dissolve and abide and dissolve in the central channel, you're trying to actualize or make manifest the extremely subtle consciousness, and then use that to realize emptiness. Because if you can realize emptiness with an extremely subtle mind, then it's very quickly cuts the afflictions, the afflictive obscurations, as well as the cognitive obscurations. So that's why that practice is done, to make manifest that extremely subtle mind. But you really have to have some skills with the channels and winds and drops and these kinds of things. And there's a lot of preparatory practices that you do. So, the 9-round breathing is great, but then Lama kind of jumped everybody to the seed syllable meditation, which is tumo, And actually, there's a whole number of different practices that you do in between, because you really have to prepare the channels and winds and drops. And you have to not only get your understanding of emptiness quite clear, but you have to develop good concentration, and you have to be able to work with the subtle body in a very efficient and efficacious way, because if you don't do it properly, then the winds go in the wrong channels, and it can bring mental disturbances, mental illness. So there's a lot of practices that are done to, some of them are physical practices, some of them are meditation practices, to really prepare the body, and then also practices to prepare the mind, so that the motivation is right and the meditation goes correctly. And so that's why that kind of meditation is always done under the guidance of a tantric master, who, not only gives you teachings on those specific things, but you report back to that person and share with them your experiences. Because otherwise, if you just kind of read a book, or, that you learn some Hindu pranayama or whatever, but you're not under somebody's guidance and supervision, you can get your winds all messed up. And then that can take a real while to undo. So it's something, that, like His Holiness will describe the steps on the tantric path, but he doesn't teach the meditations of how to do those publicly, because people aren't ready to do them. And if they try to do them, it could not be, beneficial for them at that particular time in their practice. Okay? So, to give you some, in case there were any misunderstandings about that. So I'm not denying the presence of bliss, and bliss in your meditations is quite good. But, when we're talking about working with the channels, winds, and drops, that you have to really have initiation and special instructions and supervision with. Okay? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 9-round breathing meditation can be very, very helpful for settling the mind, because you're visualizing the air going in and then expelling the attachment, going in and expelling the anger, and so on. And so it can be very good for calming the mind. That's fine to do. Yeah. I mean, His Holiness talked about it at Kala Chakra this last summer, in a public way he demonstrated it. So, yeah, that's fine. But what I'm saying is, between that and doing the seed syllable meditation. There's a whole range of other things that you do. Okay. Yeah.
Whenever besides talk about your practice and your Bodhisattva, sort of talk about like looking at that energy as almost an alternative view to karma and like that.
Yeah, no. Looking at the energy winds aren't an alternative view about karma. It's they often say that the winds have something to do with our karma. And as we purify our winds, we purify the karma. As we purify the karma, we purify the winds. That's because there's a relationship between the mind and the winds. Okay? But it's not that you take away karma and substitute winds. No, nothing like that. Yeah. And so you'll see sometimes, like when those of you doing Vajrasattva, when you say a lot of mantra, you can feel the energy of the mantra in your body, can't you? Yeah. And you can feel that. You can feel the energy in your body. You can feel the energy of the mantra in your mind. Yeah. And some days when you do the mantra, you feel like everything's going very smoothly. And sometimes you do the mantra and you feel like your energy and the mantra's energy are going like this. Yeah? Ever feel that way? So, that happens because when our winds are kind of discombobulated, you have the energy of the mantra, and the wind energy is completely discombobulated, or we have, lots of negative karma, or our mind is fully endowed with afflictions that day, then the energy of the mantra isn't going to seem to go so smoothly in our mind. Yeah? And so we have to, readjust our energy, and then you can feel that other times then the mantra goes very, very smooth in your mind, doesn't it? Yeah? So this has to do with the winds, and, Okay. Yeah. Yes.
But I do like the I only see the nectar, but not the I'm just trying, and I don't know if that's
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, when your head feels very heavy or when you have pain in your chest, you're really pushing too hard in your meditation. And I think especially with the deity above your head, if we're trying very hard to visualize the deity above our head, our attention is going there. And where the mind goes, the winds go, and then the winds get all stuck up here. Yeah? And so at that time, it's like we're pushing. We're trying too hard to see Vajrasattva. So at that time, we just need to know Vajrasattva's there and lower our focus. Yeah. Yeah. Or be more mindful of the light and nectar in your body. Yeah. Instead of being so up in your head about here and there's this and that and how far above is it and everything's up there. And then, your head you can get a headache that way. Vajrasattva's there, but here's this light and nectar that's filling your body. And it's the blissful feeling from the light and nectar that you think purifies your karma. Yeah. Because we're usually thinking, in our Judeo-Christian thing, the more I suffer and the worse I feel, the more penance I'm doing. That's wrong. Here with Vajrasattva, the nectar is very blissful, so we try and let that be. But we don't have to focus up here so much. Because remember the light and nectar and going all over the body and mind. Okay? So especially if that's happening too much up here, focus more on your belly. Either focus more on the body in general and the light and nectar there, or bring the sound of the mantra down to your belly. Yeah, and say the mantra at your belly. Because sometimes also, we Westerners, we're so up in our head, so we feel like we're saying the mantra up here. Oh, Bodhisattva Samaya, everything's going on up here. Yeah, and then that can bring some kind of unbalance. Yeah, so we really need to remember it's not that the body and mind and then a brick wall. Okay, but there's a whole organism here. Okay. You have to learn in your meditations, that when you're getting some kind of tightness somewhere like that then you have to think, okay, I need to alter what I'm doing. Yeah, and especially check out, and if you're pushing, that's often when this happens. Okay, you have to just be very accepting of yourself, very kind to yourself. Okay? Yeah. And then sometimes don't try so hard. It's like, oh, there's that nectar up there and it's not coming down. I can't get it to come down. It's like, Bodhisattva's the Buddha. The nectar's flowing down. Relax. It's okay. Yeah. And the thing is, we do the best we can. Yeah. But the main thing is, it's like when you walk in the room, like when you walk in here, you're aware of there's many people in the room and everything. But are you aware of what the people in back of you are wearing? No, but there's people sitting in back of you. Yeah. So it's kind of like that. Vajrasattva's there, but you're not, like, oh, I gotta see everything. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's why it's and that's why it's very important that you go out and get some exercise, and why we got the land here where you can look long views. Very important to look long views. Yeah, very important. When the sky's clear, look up at the stars at night. Yeah. Because looking long distances expands our mind. Sometimes when we're meditating, we get so much into, there's the Vajrasattva, there's the light nectar, and I've got to make it all come, and then you get tight. Yeah, you get tight, and that, that's not healthy for your meditation, and then you get unhappy and you get angry and stuff. Whereas when you relax and then you look long distances, all those beautiful stars, and you see the sun and the moon, you look at the clouds, and you look over there at the mountains, and how the mountain changes and where the snow is, and then you're expanding your mind, which is very, very good when you're meditating. Mm-hmm. Okay, should we go back to the Bodhisattva vows? Okay, so we were on number 15. So Shantideva says, asserting falsely, I sustain the profound. So what that means, the 15th transgression is claiming to have spiritual attainments that we do not in fact have. It does not concern realizations that we possess, but those that we have not yet achieved, so involves telling a lie. Since the action involves lying, the object must be a person who can hear and understand what we say. The action is therefore distorting the truth by suggesting that we have realizations that we lack, such as a direct understanding of emptiness. While teaching, we might be led to say, for example, I have understood emptiness directly, and out of compassion I would like to share what I have realized with you. And if you meditate accordingly, perhaps you too can gain a similar understanding and become like me. That's really blatant, isn't it? But I've heard of people doing it in much more subtle ways. Yeah, that, every time the topic of emptiness comes, they start to weep, or they, show something special, or look off into space, roll their eyes back, or, like, oh, this is, some great thing that I've experienced, to give people the sense that they've, realized something. Okay? So, this is actually, for us monastics, it's one of our root transgressions. And if we lie about our spiritual attainments, we're out. And we've broken our ordination, and there's no chance to ordain again. You're just finished. And even if you have realizations, it's not good to talk about them, because people get all sorts of ideas, and then, I've been places. I remember one time there was, at one of the teachings of His Holiness, there was some other teacher there, and some of his students were there, and his students were always saying, oh, I'm sure my teacher, he definitely realized the path of seeing. You can see it by the way he teaches. You can see it by the way he is. And they're all buzzing, oh, yes, this teacher, for sure he's realized the path of seeing. Maybe even the path of meditation, And it's like they're going on and on about this, as if, and it's one thing to have faith in your teacher, but it's another thing to start, evaluating what stage of the path they're on, and then talking with everybody else who aren't even disciples of that teacher about it, It's really rather strange. And then again in India you find all these people, oh, my teacher is an incarnation of this, and my teacher's an incarnation of that. So this particular Bodhisattva vow is about talking about ourselves. I'm using an example that's a little bit different, but equally foolish in the sense of, sitting in the tea shop and, oh, my teacher is, an incarnation of Marva, and then this other teacher's incarnation of Maitreya, and this one's, and then I met these teachers, and they're all so wonderful, and, and look, here's a picture of me with them, and and maybe I was their disciple in a previous life, when they were Marpa, maybe I was like, one of the Marpa students, and that's why we have this Dharma connection. And hours in the tea shop, discussing their teacher's realizations. Now, what good does that do for your practice?
Zero.
That's right, not much, having faith in your teacher because you believe they have realizations is one thing. But sitting and talking about it with everybody is a whole different ballgame, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. Right, because there's one form of pride that is, I'm not so good, but I'm associated with somebody who's really wonderful. So, I'm special because I'm a student of this very highly realized teacher. Okay. Yeah. So, it all comes down to we need to work with our own mind and transform our own mind and forget this stuff. So with this particular one, it can happen. Sometimes, people come and they, oh, the teachings are so wonderful. You're a Buddha, and this place is like a pure land, and all your students are bodhisattvas, and I'm sure you're a Buddha, and your teachings are just so wonderful. And then, if enough people start, because sometimes people, they have a lot of faith and enthusiasm and things like that, and they mean well, and but they're praising you. Oh, that teaching was wonderful. It was good. You must really have some great realization. And then, at the beginning, while you knew very plain and clear that, you hadn't realized anything, then all these people say, oh, this is so good. Surely you must have this. And you say, well, maybe I haven't. All these people, oh, you're so compassionate. You're so patient. You're so this. You're so... Oh, well, yeah, maybe, yeah. Maybe I have that path of accumulation, at least. Maybe it's a little bit higher than that. Yeah. So you have to be very careful when students get exuberant. Yeah. And when they're saying all this kind of thing, because sometimes the more, it's very difficult to handle, because you don't want to say thank you, because that gives them the impression that it's true, and that would be breaking this precept, saying thank you and giving them the impression that it's true. Sometimes, if you say, no, that's not true, then they go, oh, yes, it is, you're just being modest. And it's like, oh, God, leave me alone. Yeah. So you have to figure out a good way to handle it, and sometimes you just best ignore it and change the topic, Yeah. Because it sometimes can be a little bit crazy. Okay? As for the motivation, no jealousy is involved. If it were, then it would be the first transgression, praising ourselves, or belittling others, which is motivated by attachment and jealousy, not the present fault. Consequently, this transgression must occur under the influence of an affliction other than attachment or jealousy. Yeah. Because if you do it under attachment and jealousy, it's the first one. The transgression has occurred when someone actually understands what we say. If the other person does not really hear or fails to grasp the meaning of our words, the misdeed is not complete. If we have the individual liberation ethical restraints, as well as the Bodhisattva ethical restraints, we in fact commit two major downfalls and thereby transgress both kinds of ethical codes. Although Acharya Shantideva in his compendium of trainings specifies falsely claiming to have realized emptiness directly, from this we can infer that pretending to have other realizations, such as spontaneous bodhicitta, renunciation, serenity, or a direct vision of our deity, also implies accomplishing this transgression. Okay? So saying, I had a realization, I saw Tara, or I'm sure I realized Bodhisattva, bodhicitta, or, these kinds of things. Now, it does happen that some days we have a very strong experience of a particular Lamrim meditation. You're doing the meditation, or, something's happening, and then clearly it's like, whoa, and you have a very strong experience of something, okay? That doesn't mean you've attained a stable realization, but you rejoice that you've had this strong experience because it shows you that your mind is getting somewhere, and it gives you a taste of what it's like to actually have that experience, And so that's really good. It gives us something to see, oh, I'm getting somewhere, and wow, when you really feel renunciation, bodhicitta, or emptiness, wow, it really changes how you look. So even though you can't sustain that understanding, that experience, just knowing that you had it is good. Yeah. But you don't, from there you don't go and say, I've realized X, Y, and Z. Okay? Yeah. Because to say I've realized it, you really need to have some kind of, ability to concentrate on it and to hold it in your mind for some period of time. Yeah. Which I don't know about you, but I don't have, the Spirit comes and there and gone, So, yeah. But it's still very good, and rejoice at it, because you can see, oh, I'm getting somewhere. And this is actually possible. Okay? Yeah. But if you look at somebody like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he's continually humble, isn't he? He doesn't go around talking about, I've realized this and I've accomplished that. Not at all, And if you look at the really good teachers, they're all similarly very, very humble like that. Yeah. So the ones who are proclaiming their realizations in front of an audience, be quite suspicious of. If you're talking privately with your teacher, it could be a whole different situation. Yeah. But, a public thing is in the Buddhist world, it's not well looked upon in general, unless there's really some very strong specific reason. Yeah. Okay. So here's where the 4 reliances come in. Okay, remember I said I wanted to talk about those? So the 4 reliances really help us hone in on what is important. So I'll say the 4 reliances and then go back and explain them. So the first one is rely not on the teacher, but on the teachings. Okay. And then second, rely not on the words of the teachings, but on the meaning. Third, rely not on the interpretable or provisional meaning, but on the definitive meaning. And fourth, rely not on a conceptual, realization of the definitive meaning, but a direct non-conceptual realization of it. Okay? The last one, rely not on a conceptual realization of the definitive meaning, but on a non-conceptual direct realization. Okay? So the first one, where it says rely not on the teacher, but on the teaching. Okay? And then you might go, well, why not rely not on the teaching, but there's this whole chapter at the beginning of the Lam Rim about how to rely on your teacher. So what are they telling me, this and then that? What it's meaning there, when it says don't rely on your teacher, but on the teaching, it means don't get all hung up in the personality of your teacher. Don't think that your teacher is the personality. And this whole little thing that I was just talking about, oh, my teacher's so wonderful, my teacher did this, my teacher this, and my teacher, and I'm sure he's a holy being, and then some people get so into that, yeah, but then they don't listen to the teachings very carefully. And I noticed when I travel, as you notice, I travel a lot, and I'll go to different centers, and people will tell me about, Venerable so-and-so, or Geshe so-and-so, or so-and-so Rinpoche, who was there, and how funny they were, and how astute they were, and how they really, said things exactly what the students needed, and how they got everybody fired up, and how inspiring the teaching was. And then you ask, and what did they teach? And the people go, what did he teach, And it's amazing, it's like they can't remember the teachings because they were so caught up in the personality of the teacher. Yeah? So we don't want to be like that. I mean, you get all caught up in the personality, but Yeah, then when your teacher's not there, when your teacher dies, then what do you do? Okay? So you really have to pay attention to the teachings. And, and if we're going to talk in the Thai shop, talk about the teachings. Yeah? And try and discuss the teachings with our friends so that we come to a correct understanding of them and go back and forth about, well, what does this really mean and what does this mean? And I heard this and, have you heard that? And so on, okay? So try and really understand the teachings. That's what it's talking about there. Then when it says, rely not on the words of the teaching, but on the meaning, what that means is don't get all hung up about whether the teaching was delivered in a very eloquent way, with a lot of meaning and, eloquent words and gestures and, the teacher being really articulate and lots of examples and, and knowing the right time to crack a joke to ease everybody up and this kind of thing. So don't get hung up on the words, yeah, and don't just pay attention to the words, yeah, but actually try and understand what the words are meaning. What do the words refer to? Yeah. And the first time we hear teachings, we are definitely trying just to get the words. Because sometimes the vocabulary is new to us, the way the words are put together to communicate certain concepts, completely new to us. And so at the beginning, we're just trying to get the words, okay? But we shouldn't stop at knowing the words and being able to repeat the words, but we should actually think about what the words mean and meditate on the meaning, okay? So we have hearing and then critical reflection and then meditation. So don't just hear the words and remember them. Really discuss them, think about them, apply some critical reflection so that you can make sure you understand the meaning properly. Okay? So rely not on the words, but on the meaning. Okay? And then rely not on the interpretable or provisional meaning, but on the definitive meaning. What this means is that when the Buddha taught, to different audiences, he said different things. Okay, because he was an incredibly skillful teacher. And he knew, like with some people, you can't just tell them the way it is right away. You have to say something else to lead them in the right direction. Yeah. It's like if you have a little kid, yeah, and you're going to go on a cross-country trip with the kid. Yeah. You don't say, we're going to drive 3,000 miles in the car together, because your kid's going to go, sit in the car for 3,000 miles. So what do? You say, oh, we're going to go, to Spokane. Oh, goody, we get to go to Spokane. And you get the kid to Spokane, and they enjoy Spokane. Now we're going to go to Montana. Oh, goody, And so you do this slowly, extending the vision. So the Buddha was like this when he taught. So there were some people that if he told them, right away that phenomena don't have, even a tiny instance of inherent existence, they would totally freak out, and say, nothing exists whatsoever. So the Buddha didn't say that to everybody, okay? So to some people, he just said, look, there's no permanent, unitary person. Permanent, unitary, independent person. There's none of that. Okay? Well, that's good. The person understands that. Yeah. Then later he says, oh, and there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Oh, okay. Yeah, a person can understand that. And then, oh, and there's no truly existent phenomena. Okay. Oh, and there's no inherently existent phenomena either. Oh, okay. So you kind of, the teacher leads. The Buddha, led people in that way. And it's very skillful. And that's why they even say that sometimes the Buddha can appear as a non-Buddhist, because even teaching a non-Buddhist path to a specific person could be the best thing for that person at that particular time, in a way of skillfully leading them. Yeah. So if you don't understand this, then when you look at the different scriptures, you may think that the Buddha is contradicting himself. Here he said there's no there's external object, and here he's saying there's no external object, and here he's saying the mind's truly existent, and here he's saying it's not truly existent. Okay? So you could get very confused. So that's why there's this division of the teachings into what they call either provisional or interpretable. So it's provisional because that's what the Buddha taught for the time being. Or you could say it's interpretable because you have to interpret it to understand what the Buddha's really getting at. So he's saying one thing that appears to mean one thing, but actually there's a much deeper meaning, which is what his real intention is. Okay, so you have to know how to interpret the teachings to get at the Buddha's real intention. And then when the Buddha talks about what he's really intending, okay, especially if we're talking about emptiness here, then those are called the definitive teachings. He's saying very clearly how things are and talking about the deepest level of, of the ultimate nature. Yeah. So what it's saying is, don't pay attention to the interpretable provisional ones, don't rely just on that, but really question and go deeper and try and understand, the definitive teachings, which is the emptiness of inherent existence of persons and phenomena. Okay? And then, so that's the third one. Then the fourth reliance is when you're looking at the definitive meaning, don't look just with a conceptual mind and be content with a conceptual realization of emptiness, but keep going until you arrive at a non-conceptual direct realization of emptiness, because it's that non-conceptual direct realization that is the true path that brings about the true cessation. So there you have the last two noble truths, which are the real Dharma refuge. Okay, so keep going until you get that non-conceptual realization of the definitive teaching. That you've understood the meaning of correctly through paying attention to the teachings. By relying and appreciating the teacher who gives you the teaching. Okay? Okay, now number 16. Shantideva says, inflicting fines on ordained persons and accepting what has been offered or what was to be offered to the three jewels. Okay, so here it says, taking gifts from others who were encouraged to give you things originally intended as offerings to the three jewels, not giving things to the three jewels that others have given to you to give to them, or accepting property stolen from the three jewels. Okay? So the 16th transgression is acquiring the property of the three jewels indirectly by penalizing an ordained person. It shares certain aspects with the 5th transgression, stealing the property of the three jewels. Okay? However, there are important differences. The 5th involves stealing the property of the three jewels using any possible means, either taking it ourselves or having another person do it for us. So the 5th one is very blatant stealing. Okay? Here, we acquire the goods by indirect means. We use our political or judicial power, for example, to punish ordained people and oblige them to steal. In many monasteries, it was a common practice to punish certain mistakes by imposing fines. One can imagine a situation where someone abuses his power to impose a huge fine on a monk, knowing full well that he does not have the means to pay it, and that to do so he would have to steal something from the 3 jewels or have a third party do it on his behalf. Yeah. So this actually was a common practice in Tibetan monasteries. If you don't come to morning puja, if you sleep in, you pay a fine. Yeah. What they do now is they serve breakfast in morning puja. If you don't come to morning puja, you don't get breakfast. Yeah. When I was in Hamburg with the Western Sangha there, if somebody missed morning puja when they came to breakfast, they made 3 prostrations to the Sangha and said, "Excuse me for sleeping in this morning." Yeah. So, or if people didn't do their chores or whatever else they were supposed to do, there were penalties, and one way they penalized them was making them pay fees, fines. Yeah. So we're not doing that here. Maybe we should. But, okay, so here you can see that if somebody, let's say, had a lot of power and they really had a grudge against somebody, then they could impose a very heavy fine on that person, knowing that person couldn't pay it, and then putting that person in a situation where they're going to have to get money somehow. And the easiest way to do it is to steal something from the monastery or take something from the altar or do who knows what people do when they get desperate. So this could be, somebody abusing the power within the monastery, or it could be some kind of government official interfering and also penalizing somebody at the monastery. So the scriptures usually illustrate the transgression by kings and their ministers. Okay, so not the abbots. I will give an example to clarify. A minister who is backed up by the king wants something that belongs to one of the 3 jewels, gems, for example, that have been placed on the altar of a temple as an offering to the Buddha. It's like I was saying, sometimes people will come and bring, a string of pearls or diamonds or, some precious thing and offer them to the 3 jewels. Okay? So, he imposes, this minister, imposes a huge fine on the abbot of the vihara and threatens him with dire consequences if he fails to pay. Frightened to death, the abbot has one of his monks steal the gems for him and then gives them to the minister, who has thus succeeded in his mission. Okay? He then returns to his office and shares the stolen goods with the king. In the event that the king knows where the gems came from, and both he and the minister consider that they now belong to them, then they both commit the 16th major transgression. Yeah. If the king doesn't know that they were stolen property, then, it's a different ball game. Yeah. So here it is, you're not stealing directly, but you're forcing somebody else to steal. So you're forcing somebody else to create the 5th one, which is stealing from the 3 jewels. And then you're taking the wealth and using it for your own purposes. And now, although, probably most of the, you don't know what happened during the Cultural Revolution. If any of the people had Bodhisattva vows who went into the temples and stole statues and different things that then wound up on for sale in the market, in Hong Kong. We don't know if any of them had Bodhisattva vows or not. Hopefully, they didn't. Yeah, but if they did, then this is the kind of thing that would happen. Maybe, your higher up said, go steal this or go destroy the monastery. This is all, what did they say, bourgeois, junk. So, go destroy these things, and told the people to do that. And sometimes the people did it. Yeah. Okay. The minister must not impose a fine on more than 3 fully ordained monks. Otherwise, it would be the 5th transgression, taking the 3 jewels' belongings. So really, if it was, 4 or more, then, imposing that fine illegally would be the 5th one. But here it's 3 or less, so it's, it's not from the whole Sangha community, but from an individual. One of the reasons they say that stealing from the Sangha community is so heavy is that there's so many people who are part of the Sangha community. So it's like stealing from all those individuals who are part of the community. So even if you take the thing that you stole back, you don't know if all the people who were there on the day you stole it are still there. Yeah, so it's hard to actually go to the people whose property it was on that day and apologize and return it to them. Yeah, still, you should return things as much as possible. Better yet is not to take them. Yeah, but, yeah. So also, here when it says, taking gifts from others who were encouraged to give you things originally intended as offerings to the 3 jewels. Okay? So somebody has something that, that they're intending to offer to the 3 jewels, and somebody else encourages them to give it to you instead. Yeah? Like somebody wants to offer some gold cloth to, when we do the zung, the mantra rolls, so somebody wants to offer the gold cloth for that. So that's an offering to the Dharma refuge. Yeah. And then somebody says, oh, but so-and-so could really use another, they need another robe. Why don't you give it to that monastic? Okay. And so if you know that, the cloth was originally intended as an offering to the 3 jewels, but you take it for yourself because, oh, hey, I get a new robe, then that's this kind of thing, Because when somebody has the intention to give something to somebody, it's as if they already did, and especially since the 3 jewels is a very heavy object, with which we create karma, then if we take something that was originally, designated for the 3 jewels, it creates negativity. Okay? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Give a gift for the for one monastery, but maybe they have 2 or the same.
Mm-hmm.
And you give that gift to another monastery for the future spirit.
Oh, you mean you have something that you intended to give to one monastery, but then you realize they already have it.
No, the people in that monastery. They say, oh, we have 2. We can give these for another monastery, but that decides to give that gift to another monastery.
Oh. Okay, so somebody gave a gift to one monastery, and that monastery decides they want to give it to another monastery. It seems to me that that's fine, because if somebody gave it to you, then it is yours, and then, you can give it to another monastery. If somebody gave it to you and it was for, let's say, to make a robe for the Buddha, but then you gave it to the other monastery and said, use it to make a tablecloth, that wouldn't be correct. Okay, because it was an offering given for the Buddha. So if you give it to somebody else, you should say, please use it for the Buddha. Okay? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. No, it could. It's the one about fining. It's very easy for kings and ministers or government officials, presidents and county officials to do that. But it could also be, let's say, if the disciplinarian in the monastery who is, really out to get somebody. Well, I don't know. I mean, the monasteries, that's how some of them did it. They had these fines. I look at it and monastics shouldn't be having money to start with. Yeah. So fining people seems rather strange. On the other hand, when you have large monasteries and you're trying to get everybody on the same page, and this one wants to do this and this, you can see even a small monastery getting everybody to come is hard. So imagine a large one. Yeah. So, I'm not supporting this. I'm just explaining. Well, this is the one, it's not just fining, but making an unreasonable fine that would force somebody to steal. That's what it is. Okay? So they would probably just give small fines. Yeah. But this is when a fine where the person, there's no way they can do it. They're going to have to steal to pay it. Yeah, they're abusing. Okay? Yeah.
From this commentary, I got that this applies only to when the person again,
Say that again?
That the person you're getting to steal from the three jewels
has to be an ordained person? Yeah, he gave that example, because the abbot doesn't know what to do, so he tells one of his monks to steal. I don't think the person who steals has to be a monastic. I think it could be somebody else. Yeah. Yeah. So then you see a whole bunch of people are creating a lot of negativity there. Yeah, the one who steals, the one who told him to steal, the one who, gave the unfair fine, the one who told him to give the unfair fine. Yeah. A whole bunch of people involved there. Yeah. Ah.
Some architects going to speak or will or try to refrain.
They steal them, yeah. Well, that's a very good example. Somebody's been hired to repair, restore some antiques in a temple or a church, and they go in and they steal those things. Yeah. 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 And then just make something that looks like what it was.
Sometimes they make the time they can even take the painting or something that's selling in another part, and then the architect draw a line.
Yeah.
Happen with these people, the architect take it.
Mm. Yeah. 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 You can really see how greed, can create so much karma, can't it? Stealing holy objects and so on. Okay. Also, with this one, is if somebody gives you something and says, please, like you're going on pilgrimage and somebody gives you some money and says, please use this and make offerings at such and such a place for me, and you don't do it, and you keep the money and you do something else with it, then that's stealing from the three jewels, because that money was meant for the three jewels. Yeah. And as much as possible, even for us, when we think, I'm going to give something to the three jewels, after a while we shouldn't go, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't. Actually, I'd rather keep it. So, I don't want to make $100 donation. I'll make a $50 donation. when you had already kind of in your mind settled upon something. So, yeah, so it's always better to think, I'm thinking about giving this much, not I'm going to, and then changing your mind. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then 17. Causing someone to give up meditation of serenity and giving the belongings of good meditators to those who recite prayers. Okay. So this one is also called making bad rules that increase monastics' afflictions or that interfere with their dharma practice. Okay. So creating bad rules. This one calls it Part A is it causing those engaged in meditation on meditative serenity to give it up by giving their belongings to those who are merely reciting texts, or B, making bad disciplinary rules which cause a spiritual community not to be harmonious, or which takes people away from their dharma practice. Okay? So the 17th transgression has two aspects: enacting harmful laws and taking the belongings of good meditators to give them to those who simply recite texts. In the first case, the object is 1 to 3 fully ordained monastics who are good practitioners. The motivation is the desire to harm them. Okay? So, let's keep on. The action consists of establishing a vile rule stating that the monks are not allowed to do meditation retreats for 2 years, for example, and that they have to take up an occupation that stimulates their afflictions, like politics or business. It deprives the monastics of the possibility of continuing their meditations on serenity and insight, and obliges them to get involved in other activities. Okay? So here is making bad rules that people came to the monastery to further their practice, and you're making rules that are taking people away from their practice and making them do things that encourage their afflictions. Yeah. Now, it does happen, like in the large monasteries in India, they will take turns doing different things, and so it may be your turn to cook in the kitchen. And so for 2 years, what you do is cook in the kitchen, Or for 2 years, the monasteries have a hotel. I don't fully agree with this, but they'll have a hotel, and you go work in the hotel somewhere else for the monastery. Or like the monasteries in South India have fields, and so you go work in the fields, because especially when they went to India as refugees, the Indian government very kindly gave them land, but they had no money, and so they had to work the fields. So this was a desperate situation. I don't consider it in that kind of situation wrong. Yeah. But what you did see happen is that people who had more money, who made offerings to the monastery, didn't have to go work in the field, and the poor monastics had to. Yeah. And so this happens now in terms of offering service to the monastery. If you have money and you make a certain offering, then you don't have to do it, But I don't think that's fair, I don't think it's fair. And then also, I think that people, learn things from sharing in the different duties of the monastery. Yeah. And sometimes it happens that there may be somebody who's very, very intelligent, but they don't have much money, and then they're sent off to operate the hotel or work in the kitchen, when this is exactly the kind of person that you should really encourage to study so that they can become a good teacher or a good meditator. Okay? So, but, they have their own ways of running monasteries. I don't really want to comment on that, because it's a different culture, and it's a different situation when you have thousands of people at one monastery. It's a very different situation. It's a different situation when you're refugees. Okay? Yeah. But in any case, yeah, what we're talking about is like if we started a rule here at the Abbey of well, we want to build Chenrezig Hall, so everybody's got to go out and get a job for the next year, and then give all your earnings to the Abbey, and then we'll build Chenrezig Hall. And somebody unilaterally makes that decision and imposes that rule on somebody, So, yeah, you want to do it?
So cutting trees? I probably cut the wrong tree.
Yeah. Okay. So, making some kind of rule that would really, take people away from their practice. And of course there's certain situations that are extreme instances, or there's certain situations where maybe the community as a whole decides to do something. So that's different. So this is the particular case of, again, somebody who's been around the Dharma long enough to get somewhere, abusing the power. Remember we were saying last week that you can see that a lot of these had to do with people who were not the newbies, but somebody who had been around for a while. Okay, the second aspect of the transgression is to deprive monastics who are devoted to meditation of their possessions, food and other goods that either belong to them or were intended for them. Instead, they are given to people who merely recite scriptures. Yeah. So in a traditional society, you'll see, like, hanging around the monasteries or around the stupas, there will be people reciting scriptures, and that's a very virtuous thing. We do it here on special days, but, in the regular monasteries, they memorize all the prayers, they recite scriptures, they recite what they've memorized, and it's considered something virtuous. But then this is the case where there's other people who are off doing retreat, and they're really trying to develop serenity and insight. And there's, material goods that are designated to them to support them in their retreat, but maybe you're jealous of them, or you don't like them, or you're whatever, and you want to interfere with what they're doing. So you take the food and so on that was intended for them, or that they already have, and you give it instead for people who are reciting scriptures. And that's not so good, because it's clearly, more meritorious if somebody's actually trying to do the work to get the realizations. Yeah, and we should support the meditators like that, not take their things away and give them to somebody who's reciting. Okay. Again, the motivation is to harm the meditators. As before, if we dispossess either a monastic who is an Arya or 4 monastics or more, it is the 5th transgression, not this one. For the transgression to be complete, as in all the cases of theft, we must steal something worth at least 1 unit in the local currency. I would say steal something at least the value of which the law is in that area is going to get involved. Finally, if we take good meditators' belongings but do not give them to those who just say prayers, it will not be this transgression, but could be the 7th. Okay, so the 7th is with regard to a bhikshu or bhikshuni, even with degraded ethics, confiscating their robes, striking him, having him incarcerated, and making him defrock. Okay, so if you take something from somebody and you just keep it yourself, then it's the 7th one, if the person's a monastic. But if you take it and then give it to somebody who is reciting scripture, then it's this one. Okay? Thus far, we have presented the 14 transgressions found in the Akashagarbha Sutra and listed by Shantideva in his Compendium of Trainings. The 11th of the 14 is equivalent to the first transgression in our list, praising oneself or belittling others. Excluding it, there are 13 left to add to the 4 initial transgressions from the Bodhisattva levels, making a total of 17. The final major misdeed, which is drawn from the Sutra for Skillful Means, is forsaking the spirit of enlightenment, in other words, the bodhicitta. And so that will become our 18th Bodhisattva vow. Any remaining questions? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How does that reflect on the availability of books and teaching on the internet, online content, and things like that? There's clearly not assessing anyone's ability to
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so how does that one about not teaching emptiness to the unprepared relate in this world where so much material is freely available? Well, I've been editing Khenso Jampa Tekchok's book, Insight into Emptiness, and the first few chapters of the book are going through what is samsara, the importance of renunciation, developing bodhicitta, and he says, what is refuge? And he says very clearly, I would feel very strange not teaching this first before teaching you emptiness. So the first chapters of the book have that, And I think that's what he's doing, is he's giving people some kind of background. Yeah. So, so many books you will find there is some kind of introduction like that. Yeah. But you can understand that people who are new, who, pick up something that is a very complex teaching and they don't have the proper background, they get very confused. Yeah. They may not fall to the view of nihilism, but they do get quite confused.
From the person writing or making the information available to the people, expect to make sure that they done their best.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they take steps to prepare who's ever reading the book. Yeah. Yeah. Now, regarding tantric stuff, which this doesn't concern, but the free availability of tantric stuff on the internet is, just amazing. So, hopefully if people write books about tantra and it's for people with initiations, they should write in the very beginning, for people with such and such an initiation. But then you have people who don't have that initiation. But, it's like, hey, I want to read this. Yeah. Or, some completion stage teaching. Wow, I want to learn all about this and that and the other thing. And, I don't know what to say. I personally wouldn't put that book out. Yeah. But then other people make different choices for whatever reasons. Okay. But as readers, we should be careful. And if we haven't taken an initiation, don't read the thing that says for people with such and such an initiation only. Be respectful of what the book says. And if we start to read a book, let's say on emptiness, and we see that it's like way over our head, then go back and read the things that you can understand and put into practice easily, and then work your way up until you get to the point where you can, read the more complicated books. Yeah. What usually happens is people get so frustrated reading the complicated books, especially because sometimes the terminology is not so easy, that then they just put the book down. Yeah, because they can't understand it anyway.